Christian parenting.
Welcome to the Living Wholehearted podcast. We are Jeff and Tara Mattson, a husband and wife team who is shrinking the integrity gap in our own lives and helping others do the same. I'm a leadership and organizational development coach, and Tara is a licensed marriage and family therapist.
We believe that if you have a following, you are a leader, and how you lead matters. Whether you are leading in the home, work, or community, we are bringing you biblical, clinical, and relational wisdom to help you in every relationship that matters most to you. None of us do this perfectly, but we are leaning into the reality of our humanity and profound wisdom of grace.
Hello, and welcome to the two-part podcast with guest and friend Scott Hatley. When Scott and I originally recorded this interview, it went far beyond our regular appointed time because we were having such a good time connecting, and Scott shared so many meaningful things from his point of view in leadership. So if you're catching this at this time, you're connected to part 2 of the two-part podcast. I would encourage you to go back and listen to part 1 first, if that's how you're starting out with us today. I hope you'll enjoy getting to know Scott and his important perspective on leadership. Enjoy part 2. Well, what did you do about those things, right? So in relationships, how did you kind of begin to equip yourself to face the relational challenges that took place in your journey? How did you begin to take some practical steps towards countering those voices inside that were keeping you from stepping in on earlier? Maybe just speak to some of that. How could what you did help others get an example? Not that it's the only way, but you did some things. It didn't just happen, and it was hard.
Yeah.
So what did you do?
Right. No, you're right. So, I would say one of the key parts was just building up confidence and, confidence by just getting out there and doing different things. And, I was a fairly shy person back in the day and even really inside. And so, I'd be this sort of like this kind of thing would have terrified me, back in the day. But I worked on my public speaking. I had a speech coach that helped me with that, and I got better at it and I got more confident at it. I also joined a few nonprofit boards outside of the nonprofit I, been running inside for all these years and working to build up. And so that provided me an avenue to meet people outside. And, I had opportunities to be on like the United Way board in Portland, which was a significant board with, some high profile players. And so that helped a little bit. I would say definitely faith and just continuing to kind of be faithful and, just whenever I could trying to conquer those fears. I think that was the big part, was the fear.
Yeah.
And just letting that paralyze you. And I don't know if there's any specific things I exactly did other than just kind of like consistently working on myself and trying to grow and, reading books and having mentors. I think that was huge, having people to talk over things and kind of get their perspectives and get their guidance. Because obviously they were a bit older than I was and they had gone through different situations. But I would say some of it was just like having to go through the situation and learning from it when maybe you let fear conquer you or paralyze you. And then I think just finally the last few years being thrown into the deep end and just kind of like, it's like sink or swim and there's no choice. And so, that's a quick way to kind of conquer some fears. Not that you don't have them, but just you still kind of keep moving forward even despite, your concerns or fears.
That's a great answer. Yeah. What I'm hearing you really say is that you took practical steps to turn towards things, and you put yourself out there in ways that went from being more shy to actually meeting with people, engaging with people, and in different environments, different leaders, different mentors. You watched and observed people, and as you were a board member with other board members, so on and so forth, you took courageous steps to grow, and that requires risk. Scott, you trailblazed a way and other people are hearing this and that may have been feeling some of those same feelings that you had felt, that you may still feel from time to time, but you have had a lot of muscle memory in dealing with those untruths or some of those lies or some of those feelings that would inhibit you turning towards you. You've got years now of stepping into stuff, and you're going to just knowing you're going to continue to step into things. And you're also saying that sometimes that's the only thing that you can do when, especially like in emergency situations that come up, or where you just got to prioritize what's more important than the fear. And you build muscle memory. Maybe that's it, in this space. And then you lean into that, the historical record of that for whatever's coming next or whatever is right now. Am I hearing that right?
Right. No, and I think I would add two other things. I think it's also trusting who you are, that you're going to make the right decision, or if you don't, then you're going to learn from it. And, you're not going in it with making, like, with malice or, trying to make the wrong decision. You're trying to make the right decision. So you just have to trust that you've had enough experience where, okay, you're going to be going in the right direction. That's one. And then I would say for me, the other piece is that through all these different experiences, I kind of learned what good leadership was, and I also learned what bad leadership was. And so, I can kind of started to make those connections of like, oh, okay, so this has been happening, but that's not really good leadership. That's kind of not the right way to lead. Or, this is somebody that's doing a really good job. It's like, wow, that's impressive. Like, I want to be like them, so.
Observing what's before us and what we've also experienced or seen is a great teacher, a great way to learn. Because there's lots of examples, right? Probably unfortunately, more examples of poor leadership than there are good, but there's many good, and we have to find them. And you can find them because, just like the principle of darkness and light, right? In darkness, any light is really clearly visible, right? And so, I mean, they're out there. There's so many good leaders doing wonderful work in our community, our shared community, and around everywhere. And, we want to, the principle I think I'm hearing you say is especially to young leaders that are trying to discover their leadership journey, and to do it with we talk a lot about right motive and right method here, needing to have those parallel tracks. And when we have both those things, even though we're trying to discover what the right method is, if you have the right motive, which is what you were talking about, learning to trust yourself, if you're seriously trying to help, if you have the right motive in leading, and to empower others, to solve problems, and for it to be helpful to the majority as opposed to the minority, so on and so forth. If you're thinking about those types of things, right motive, and you just got to find the right methods, and they're out there as an example. So you are a student of leadership, and you are a student of leadership as you are leading, and that it allows you to build trust in yourself, confidence, and then we can make mistakes with the right motive. We're searching for the right ways of doing things, and we're trying different methods. There's freedom in that to make mistakes. And what would you say about that, Scott, for those that feel paralyzed inside as a leader to in their mindset, inhibited at the fear of making mistakes or not performing or not? I mean, image keeping is such a big temptation as it relates to leadership, because everybody's watching us. And we, they see us as an example, we start believing our own press in some respects. So speak to that. What about the fear of making mistakes, or how do you address that?
Yeah, well, I think you hit it on the head. I mean, that was one of my biggest issues early on is like that fear of like, oh, what if this is not right, or what if this is wrong, or like, what if we're going the wrong direction? And I was fortunate because I was surrounded by some people that wasn't their issue. They didn't have a challenge with that. And so that helped a little bit. And I had some mentors that helped kind of bring me along and sort of had the faith and let me sort of make some of those mistakes under their watchful guise. And so that was very helpful to have that. And so I think it was kind of a double-edged sword, in that it was a crutch that you could lean on and, help kind of have the training wheels going, but yet it was also the training wheels. And so it didn't really push me out there. And so I feel like I probably didn't advance quite as quick as I would have had I not just been thrown in there. And it would have been a lot more scary, more terrifying, had I been thrown in the fire. But, it's like somehow fire has a way of like sort of bringing out the, I don't know what it is, urgency or the best of you. Like you kind of get your butt in gear and you get moving.
Yeah. You mentioned, kind of the principle there is this really, you got to, you got to lean into others. I love that you said that you had others in your life who didn't have that fear. And what a perfect example of learning our limits, but also leaning to others that don't have necessarily some of those limits, right? To be able to be given a vision and encouragement and an opportunity to learn from them, or that what that looks like, and to be drawn towards that. For you and I, as it relates to just kind of our faith background, we call that the body of Christ, but just the principle of that no one is all things to all people here. And we, each are given opportunities, and our gifts and strengths, whatever they may be, may dovetail perfectly with someone who doesn't have those, and vice versa. And we're meant really to be better together in that way. You're describing that from a leadership standpoint. It's really on principle. It's so good to be able to look to others who maybe have gifts or abilities that would directly provide solutions to some of the things that we don't have, and not be threatened by that. To not think I need to be that per se, but to lean into each other in a healthy interdependence is kind of what I hear you say. And that actually helped develop confidence and trust for you to step in and practice, right? To get the training wheels off in some respects. And yeah, I love that. And we need each other.
No, I think that's absolutely right. Well, and I think that was another area where I probably held back, is that I kind of looked at other people and be like, I'm not that, like, how can I be who they are, when it was kind of coming to grips and comfort with the fact of who I am and what skills I bring, because what I bring is different than what they bring. And sometimes it's not always an apples to apples comparison. Sometimes it's apples to oranges, where the upsides they have are the downsides that I don't have.
We benefit greatly when we get out of our own heads, out of our own world, which leadership can be so isolating if we allow it to, and to engage with others, and to hear those perspectives, and to feel a sense of what it's like to be human and to be a leader, right? And our world and our vision gets bigger, right, which hopefully leads to healthy interdependence with others. Our growth is part of that. There's no shortcuts to that. And then also that freedom that comes from, and empowering others to do likewise.
As a mom today, it's harder than ever to instill the godly confidence our daughters so desperately need. Helping moms raise confident daughters is the resource you've been looking for to help you develop and keep a trusted connection with your daughter, while helping her to be confident in all that God has created her to be. These courses were developed by me, Tara Mattson, a licensed marriage and family therapist for over 20 years, and are meant to help you have one-to-one dates with your daughter each month.
Each Helping Moms Raise Confident Daughters course includes 8 video lessons from moms like you, giving behind-the-scenes coaching on the mental, emotional, and physical world of your girl, conversation guides to foster deep discussions between you and your daughter, and a downloadable journal to spark a more intimate connection between you, your girl, and God.
Choose your course today and get a leg up on talking to your girl about important topics like her relationship with God, her changing body, and her identity. Currently, there are courses for moms and daughters from 2nd grade through 8th grade. When it comes to raising confident and godly girls, you are the right mom for the job, and you don't have to do it all alone.
Visit cpguides.org to select your course today. That's cpguides.org. I love it, Scott. Okay, so I'm just going to ask you here about somebody that was that for you, right? We're talking about maybe one of your heroes, whether it was a personal relationship or somebody that you looked to or read about that's inspired you. I mean, who is a hero of yours that has inspired you to embody this, to take those steps courageously in your leadership journey, despite all the challenges in your own journey? Who helped you to become the trailblazer that you are, and remain this?
So there's a lot of pieces to that I could answer, but I'll start with. So my mom went to the National Air and Space Museum in DC when I was a really young child. And she brought back this poster, and I think it was something about going to the moon, or some kind of, maybe it was Neil Armstrong stepping foot on the moon. But anyway, so when 5th grade came around, we had this thing called Night of the Notables. And so the night of the notable I picked was Neil Armstrong. And so I think for me, I was just really inspired by him being a trailblazer and being the first to step foot on the moon. Obviously, he wasn't the only trailblazer in that endeavor. Obviously, there was a lot of people that were paving the way for that first trip into space that landed on the moon. But for me, like growing up, a lot of my inspiring people were people like Neil Armstrong, or like Martin Luther King, or like Abraham Lincoln, or people that kind of paved the way, or, were confronted with real challenging life circumstances, and they rose to the occasion and hit it head on. Speaking of trailblazers and love of sports, I also, the early 90s Blazers were one of my favorite teams. The Clyde Drexler, Terry Porter, Buck Williams era, Jerome Kersey. And for me, I always, I liked all of them, but I kind of really loved Buck Williams. He was the power forward, and I loved it because he was always the guy doing the dirty work. He wasn't afraid to kind of like get in there and muck around and, change elbows with Karl Malone and rebound and do the dirty work. And so that wasn't necessarily only what I loved about him, but I also loved that he had faith. He had a faith. And when I was young, I'd gone to a Billy Graham crusade in the 90s, and Buck Williams was one of the guys giving his testimony. And so hearing him speak was really cool, just to see one of your favorite guys up there sharing his personal story beyond basketball. And so I always was inspired by that. I would definitely, I also like Bob Dole. I know has done a ton for people with disabilities over the years. I've definitely had a lot of personal and mentor peers that, have done a ton for me to kind of get me where I am, more practically in the last 20 years. So
the list is long, though, man. And the fact that you have that many people that you would say, yeah, and going back to 5th grade and Neil Armstrong, and the poster, the picture of him and the footprint on the moon, and your mom bringing that back from the Aerospace Museum, Flight Aerospace, one of the Smithsonian in DC. Yeah, we were just there recently, and it's under construction. But I remember that back in 8th grade too, actually, and just. These people did those objects in that facility are unbelievable when you think about it. Yeah, and it gives you courage and vision to be able to do hard and to believe in amazing things.
Right. Well, and none of those guys have had really any like personal impact. It's just been more like what I've seen from them. But obviously, that is so huge for a child, a youth, when they're thinking about the future and see some people that they can idolize that are worth emulating, exhibit that.
Yeah, and we need, behaviors. Like we talked about at the beginning of this podcast, we need real flesh and blood, real people that, whether we know them personally or know of them, to be able to look to. That it's so important to aspire to. Now, they're not perfect either. They would probably be able to acknowledge some of the challenges and flaws that they had struggled with, and fears and so on and so forth. But yeah, a lot of what we know of those kinds of figures help us to take courageous steps in our own journeys in the present, because they paved the way. That's awesome.
Yeah, well, and you're actually making me think of another experience. So FDR, in some ways, I always was inspired by him because obviously he was well ahead of the time, having a disability, and they, had to keep that quiet because it likely wouldn't have meant he could have been elected, but just the way he dealt with that. And so actually in the 5th grade play, they had FDR in it, so I got to be FDR. So that was also the other kind of, figure from the past.
Yeah,
That was kind of
the
fun to
longest
sort of
sitting
look up
president,
to.
if I remember correctly. I mean, he held the seat the longest, and also in DC. We were
Right.
there not too long ago. Saw his memorial or monument, I should say, and just learn more of his story. That's awesome, Scott. There's so much more we could get into, and we're just gonna have to have you back, buddy. But I thank you for just
Right.
sharing from your story and from the heart as to how you faced the challenges that you faced. And I know that many people will be encouraged just to hear that from a leadership perspective, and obstacles that you've overcome and are overcoming. And, it's just looking at hard things and finding ways to reframe. I'm using that word again because it seems to be something that you do so well, and it can encourage others to do so also. Reframing situations that you described. I mean, what you guys went through with INCIGHT and the challenges that you had in organizationally speaking, that every other organizational leader, whether for-profit or nonprofit, certainly was facing too. You saw that, and you named that actually as one of your favorite experiences in leadership journey, although it was terrifying as well. So, it's exhilarating to be tested, to be meeting challenges, and when we can step in with the right motive, and then trying to figure out and learn from others and connect to get to best methods, right methods. And when you have those parallel tracks, we are free to lead and to help others and to point the way, and that can be younger and that can be older and so on and so forth. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, one other thing that kind of always strikes me in my life too is that it's kind of this sort of rule for me is like, someone's better off than I am,
Okay.
but there's somebody that's worse off than I am. And so I kind of try to have those kind of dual sort of visions of like, yes, there are people that are in much better position, either financially or leadership or, physically, but there also are people that are much worse off, financially and physically and, having opportunities. So that always kind of gives me sort of some courage to be like, okay, well, this could be worse. It may not be great, but it could be worse.
Yeah, that broadens your sense of reality because it's true. And sometimes we can feel like ours is our situation and it can get so myopic. But yeah, you're saying, I choose to stay in reality. And the reality is based on how you've discovered the world around you and people that you know for sure. There's some that have it easier and some that have it worse. So that helps ground you in your perspectives, is what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah, I would say so. And just, having disability, like I know some people that are stuck in a care home somewhere and not doing anything. And so it's like, oh man, I don't want that. And so I'm fortunate that at this point that's not me.
Okay, well, I got two last questions here because I'm loving this. We're rolling. And I can't leave this without asking these. So Scott, would you be willing to share with our audience just that can help the greater community to better understand, include, lean into, and champion our brothers and sisters with disabilities? I mean, what would you be willing to share, like, just to be mindful of this, again, the greater community?
Yeah. So I would say that's a pretty in-depth question. There's a lot kind of to unpack there. And maybe that's something we talk about in a different podcast. So I mentioned a couple of words that are important in INCIGHT: changing hearts and minds, and then leveraging obstacles. And either one of those could almost be could be a podcast in themselves.
Right.
But where I'm going with that is a lot of INCIGHT's desire with the changing hearts and minds is, how do we reframe the disability conversation? How do we bust stigma? How do we kind of bring expectations in the forefront? I would say there's not always an expectation level for people with disabilities as there are for other demographics. And so that is a piece that has held individuals with disabilities back. Some of it is their own limiting beliefs that have held them back, not some of the same journey I've gone through, maybe never fully having the opportunity or the people to invest in their potential. Some of it is definitely the workplace and society at large that is uncomfortable on disability. It's not a topic that people are comfortable leaning into, especially if they don't have a lot of experience with it. And yet disability is one of the largest minorities. About 60 million Americans have a disability of some sort. And I think the challenging part with that is that you often think of disability as that visible, person in a wheelchair disability, when there are a ton of invisible disabilities. And now when you have people experience a lot of mental health challenges these days, like that's a different kind of disability and challenge, but they can all sort of impact and debilitate people from finding success. And so for us, it's how do we bring that conversation to the workplace and help it be a little more comfortable conversation. Now, I would say individuals are like, with disabilities are like anybody, in that different people have different preferences. So for me, for instance, like you ask me the question, I'll answer it. I mean, I'm used to going into schools and kids saying, well, how do you go to the bathroom and why do you wear glasses? And so, almost any question is within limits for me. But there's other people that are, they're offended when you ask them about who they are and what their disability is. And so part of, for me, I see is how do we help both sides sort of reframe the conversation? How do we get people to be more comfortable knowing that those without disabilities are curious at times? They want to know, like, I mean, you see a kid in the supermarket and they're staring at you, and they're not staring at you because they want to be mean or make you uncomfortable. They're just like, I've never seen this person in a chair, like I'm curious what this is, and they have questions and they want to know. And once you answer their questions, it's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. So I'm not saying that adults always know how to ask questions in an appropriate way, but I sort of feel like as you become an adult, you sort of your parents kind of say, well, you can't ask that question or don't stare, it's almost like you're shamed for doing it. And so I'm not saying that all of a sudden, people should start doing that, but I'm just saying it's kind of, it almost becomes ingrained. And so one of the other key points is the leveraging obstacles. And so we kind of describe, like, how do you dynamically adapt to your situation with, courage and humility, and just kind of move forward in that way. And so part of it is, how do we help people with disabilities leverage obstacles in their life? How do they take this obstacle they've had and turn it into something really significant and positive? But also, how do we do the same in the workplace and help the workplace see people with disabilities as an untapped asset that could really impact their bottom line? And, because obviously the purchasing power of 60 million people is pretty significant. So if you can harness that, I mean, that's a significant impact to your bottom line as a business.
Those things make perfect sense to me, Scott. I think that we need translators. All of us do, to help connect dots and to help break down stigmas, and to be empowered to turn towards each other, and to same thing, a linking of arms metaphorically to connect to each other in a healthy way, and to build each other up and to lean into each other's. And I like the way I think you use it, different abilities, as opposed to the disability language, different abilities, which is the broader context that we were talking about within the example we use of the body of Christ, right? Now, different abilities and leaning into each other in a healthy way, and breaking things down so that it's okay to be curious, but then asking questions and having questions answered, and spending time with people who are different and with different abilities, no matter what that is good for us. It
Right.
It connects us as opposed to segments us or compartmentalizes us from others.
Well, we have another unique term at INCIGHT. We call it compensating assets. And so, like people with disabilities, they have a way of compensating for areas that they have, let's say, weaknesses in or aren't as good in. And so, like, for me, like, just a quick example of a compensating asset is that, physically it's hard for me to write notes. So when I go into a meeting, like, I've never really been able to in the last, 10, 15 years write notes. And so I have to use my brain to remember the points I need to make, or rely on other people. And so you could ask, some board members of our organization or some friends or some coworkers, and they can tell you that, I almost never forget a name or a face or a context. And it's probably, it could just be natural ability, but it's probably because I've had to learn how to sort of harness the brain power to remember those details and keep those straight, until I can write them down somewhere. And so that's a compensating asset I have. And so I think when you talk about also different abilities, I think we each have those different abilities that we compensate for at different times.
Brilliant, right? And to lean into those strengths, right, that are compensating assets. They're assets in any system that you could find yourself in. I mean, I could use your memory in all kinds of ways because I can take notes, and that's the only way it actually gets in there. But I could ask you a question and save me a great deal of time than having to go back to look through actual physical notes. If I'm working with you, we're working together, right? And there's some things that you could lean into me for, and that's just the point.
Absolutely.
Right? Compensating assets. I love that. It's such a positive and truthful reality that for anyone that we can see, and specifically within the disability community, it's like, no, they are part of the community. Their compensating assets are as valuable, if not as valuable as anybody else's, and unique, just like we would look in the marketplace for any assets. I go into organizational spaces and help leaders at the top really look for the assets within their workforce, the people that they're missing and not seeing, no matter what they are, how old they are, what culture they have, whatever they've come in with. It's amazing when leaders become more aware of the assets that are right around them and begin to leverage and use them, how it impacts, like you said, really every metric that they care about, whether it's a business or nonprofit, so on and so forth. And Scott, it's I just love being with you here. What's next for INCIGHT? I mean, and we'll just maybe let you have the kind of the final word here. Then what's next for INCIGHT? And then leave our audience with how they can find more about you and about INCIGHT or about the work that you're up to. So I'll let you close us with this.
Yeah, no, so we've got several things that are ahead for INCIGHT. And one of the things I would even describe is that, you and Tara and others have inspired me to write a book. And so, I'm in the midst of starting that journey on writing a book. And, you've heard me talk about leveraging obstacles and changing hearts and minds. Well, that's a big part of the story. So in a way, I've given you a little taste today of what that story will look like. But I feel like it's so important to share this story, not only with other families with neuromuscular diseases or families that maybe have just gotten a diagnosis of their child having a disability and they're trying to figure out, what do we do? How do we handle this information? Where does that take us next when maybe they weren't expecting that kind of curveball? So I think that's important, and realizing that you can still have a full, long life, even in spite of sort of circumstances that maybe take it in a different direction than is expected. But yet also, the general population, there's some, I think, important nuggets, as I always seem to get a nugget from other leadership books out there. So that's an important piece. But in a way, it's INCIGHT, but it's also me personally. Important to INCIGHT is we're working to develop a sustainable organization financially. And, we have a number of donor supporters. We have a number of grant supporters and corporate supporters. And those are all important. And we want to keep, developing and cultivating those relationships. But yet at the same time, we would like to develop additional revenue for the organization that can sustain it beyond those. And we already have this educational curriculum, about 89 lessons for students that are transitioning between high school and adult life or college or whatever that journey looks like. So pretty much 16 to 21. And so we're working to build that out more, but we're working to develop content beyond just the education setting, in that, we talked to a lot of employers, and there's a huge need right now, and, cross-sectionality is really important these days as well. But disability is starting to kind of creep up as one of the other populations that's sort of been historically underserved. And so there's a need for more content. And so we're developing content for employers that they could utilize with their employees as part of trainings, as part of individual conversations, but giving them more tools that they can use to continue this conversation around disability. And I would close with one item with that, in that I think one of the opportunities workplace and businesses have for disability is that, doing this assessment of their own employee base and determining how many already identifies having a disability. And is there a way you can confidentially do that and get a sense of how many in your workplace already have a conversation or already have a disability? And all of a sudden, if you have 20% of your population, then, well, that's a whole different kind of opportunity to sort of harness conversations and dialogue to make that a more comfortable conversation. So in a way, that's really what we're seeking to do. And then what's important to us also is people getting jobs and getting scholarships and having those tools that allow them to take the steps to find success and unlock their own potential. So
there's a bright future ahead. I mean, it's already bright, but the light's getting brighter. And Scott, you're trailblazing the way, and your voice is helping others normalize conversations that need to be had, and seeing more people that may have been missed, and empowering them and breaking through stigmas. I mean, thank you, Scott, for being who you are and for doing what you're doing. It's awesome, and we just link arms together as two leaders in our community, doing different things, but with the same heart and a desire. I just love getting a chance to get to know you even better today, hearing what insights into your story and what INCIGHT is doing and is anticipating doing. Can't wait to get this book. We have talked a little bit about it, but that's going to be awesome, and expanding the message that you have to more people. So if people want to find you and find the resources online, Scott, where do they go?
So we have a website. It's www.incight.org, and the INCIGHT spelling is unique. It's INCIGHT, and it's actually the hybrid of the two words of insight, to spark a passion and intimate knowledge of the fusion of the two. So that's our INCIGHT nonprofit website. We also have a publication we do called The Understanding, and it's all about pushing positive perspectives. It tends to have a lot of stories around disability, but that's not always the focus of it. And that website is basically just theunderstandingmagazine.com. So
Perfect.
2 opportunities to kind of get some different pieces, and we have a subscription to that, and so we produce that publication quarterly. But I just really also appreciate the opportunity, Jeff, to have a conversation, and I think we both know that a lot of impact can also come by other people hearing the story. I mean, there's only so much we can do personally one-on-one with people. We keep doing that, but at the same time, if our message can inspire others or influence another leader, then that's super powerful as well, beyond just like the direct, one-on-one relationships we have.
That's so true. That's so true. Before we even started our interview today, like we do in each of ours, just had a moment of prayer. Just asked God to take this and use this just the way He sees fit. We don't know how it goes, but it is amazing to know that He's orchestrating how this will be taken and how this will be used. Who needed to hear it today? We trust Him in that. And I trust you, friends. So thank you for this time and the chance to just kind of expand and dive deeper into a relationship together, and then to share that with others in our audience that listens into the Living Wholehearted podcast. And so thanks again, Scott, for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff, and blessings to you and Tara as you continue to reach more people through this podcast.
Thank you so much. Well, our Wholehearted Leadership Cohort application is now open. If you're interested in taking a 2-year journey with other leaders from around the nation, check out the details on our site, livingwholehearted.com. You'll get 15 one-to-one coaching sessions with one of our trauma-informed executive coaches, monthly group cohort meetings on a platform designed to create dialogue and community, and 4 in-person retreats in the beautiful Willamette Valley of Oregon. Scott knows about the beauty in here in the Northwest. We were passionate about walking alongside leaders as well. Scott talked a lot about pouring into others, and we share that passion. And so we're just happy to have you listen today and connect with our community. If you like what you're hearing, thank you for taking notice on that and liking and subscribing to what we're up to. Again, thank you, Scott, for this opportunity to connect with you today. And I also wish you the very best as we journey together here in our community.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. Take care.
This podcast is powered by Living Wholehearted, Courageous Girls, and the Christian Parenting Podcast Network. Thank you for joining us in this critical movement of shrinking our integrity gaps between what we preach and live.